Welcome to the Short Term Show, the show about short-term rentals and long-term wealth, with real property owners hosting real properties who are crushing it in the vacation and short-term rental space. And here's your host, Avery Carl.
Good morning out there, all you short-term shoppers. It's Avery Carl, and I wanted to give you guys a quick reminder about something that I don't think I've done a good enough job of keeping you aware of. So I get a lot of emails from y'all every week, and I love getting emails from you, by the way. I love talking to our listeners, and a lot of them are asking for real estate agent recommendations in different markets. And what I don't think I've done a good job of is making sure that you guys are aware that the Short Term Show is actually a subsidiary of the Short Term Shop, which is the largest short-term rental specific real estate team brokered by EXP. I have to say that or I get in trouble, in the country. So we have offices in 12 of the top short-term rental markets in the country, and we are here to help you purchase your first, second, third, or 10th short-term rental. And if you buy with us in any of those markets, we have a whole back-end training program where we will teach you everything you need to know about managing your short-term rental remotely. Everything from setting up your Airbnb and VRBO listings to teaching you how to use all the property management software that you'll need, all the way down to helping you source your local boots on the ground like cleaners and handymen. And we have some awesome Facebook support communities that we want you guys to be a part of, where we all share ideas and information about managing our short-term rental, which short-term rentals, which markets are the best, what we're doing next, and all of that really fun stuff. So if you want to be a part of the Short-Term Shop community, if you want to buy a house with us, we really want to help you guys. So head on over to theshorttermshop.com and click schedule a consultation. We'll see you there. If you invest in real estate or manage properties, you need banking that's truly built for your business. Many traditional banks make it difficult to sync banking information across many of the personal finance platforms that we as real estate investors use every day. This is why I recommend Relay. Relay is an online banking and money management platform that's a perfect fit for any real estate business. First, there are no account fees, no overdraft fees, and no minimum balances, which means you get to keep more money in your pocket. Relay also goes above and beyond the banking basics to help you understand precisely what you're earning, spending, and saving. You get up to 20 checking accounts to organize and allocate income for things like day-to-day expenses, investments, or taxes. And if you have multiple investment properties set up as separate business entities, that's no problem. Relay lets you open unlimited accounts and access everything from one single login. Best of all, Relay makes your bookkeeping speedy and meticulous by giving you ultra-detailed transaction data and directly syncing it back to QuickBooks Online and Xero. The ability to have so many separate bank accounts and allocation options in my user dashboard has really transformed my personal banking experience. I will never go back. It takes 10 minutes to apply for a Relay account, and you can do it online at relayfi.com/theshorttermshop. So again, for more information and to open an account, go to relayfi.com/theshorttermshop. Hey guys, welcome back to the Short Term Show. Today we have Chuck Kramer, an investor and entrepreneur. And today we're going to talk about investing after retirement. So a lot of our guests talk about, they're maybe in the middle of their career or towards the beginning and they want to quit their job. But today we're going to talk about starting investing after you've already retired. So how's it going, Chuck? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, it's going great here. Not sunny. It's raining. That's a little different, but spent 30 years in IT. That's kind of an understatement. Did a lot of different things. As a senior IT guy, you have to know a lot about a lot of different kinds of businesses. I was sort of a virtual CIO for hire. Gave me a lot of experience in a lot of different things. Also gave me the opportunity to retire early at 53 without having yet invested in real estate. So other than that, I've got some grandkids. My kids are all spread across the country, and traveling is my number one passion.
Awesome. Yeah, it is. The rain here is really bad, which is why my hair is a mess. Chuck and I live in the same town, by the way, guys. And earlier I was walking into my office and I was trying to walk through the landscaping because the road was kind of flooded. And I was trying to step through the pine straw because it was like looked like an island in the water. And I stepped in it and went down and into water up to my ankles. So my socks and shoes are totally a mess, and I'm a mess. And yeah, it was an interesting start to the day. But let's talk about. So you haven't always lived down here. Um, let's talk about your first short-term rental investment. What made you decide to do that? You've already retired, you've got grandkids, you're spending time with your family. What made you decide to get into short-term rental investing?
Well, as I said, my number one passion is travel. My wife and I wanted to do more of that. But one of the things that was kind of smarting was back in '08 when the markets took the big dive. I'm sitting there with my retirement account. I was on a 10-day cruise with no internet access and lost 28% during that cruise. It was a very expensive cruise. I decided I didn't want to be in that situation again. So I only invested in things I could monitor frequently and react fast. Well, after a few years, kind of get tired of that. It becomes another job, and I didn't want that. Real estate seemed to be calling me, and we started with a couple of long-term rentals, and they were working out well. And we have family in Gatlinburg, so we made a trip up there about the time of the fires, the big wildfires in 2016, with the idea of investing in long-term rentals. We knew there was a housing shortage, and that was before the fire. And it met all my criteria for a market. And we started looking at places, and back then, almost everything for sale was a cabin. Regular run-of-the-mill single-family homes were pretty rare on the market. And my agent goes, you can make a lot more money at this as a rental. I said, yeah, but I don't want to get involved with that. But I looked at it, ran the numbers, and I said, he's right. We can do like 3 times better. And that became that cabin, we paid cash for it, became our first rental. And it hasn't stopped from there. So.
And how many, well, I think you've bought and sold several over the years. So how many cabins did you end up with after that first one?
Within a year, we had 4. Market was a little different back then.
Yeah. Back then everything was super cheap. Actually, the first cabin I bought had been a long-term rental previously, and there was a tenant in it that had to move out while we were under contract. And it just used to be an entirely different ball game back then. Everything was just sitting on the market for like 6 or 7 months. And Julie got one. I think I've mentioned this on the show before, but I'm going to say it again. She bought a 1-bedroom that she had a 100% cash on cash return on back then. So, it was nuts. There's still deals out there now, but not like there used to be. I mean, shoulda, coulda, woulda. Well, insert every real estate quote ever about yesterday being the best time to buy.
Yes. Yesterday is always the best time.
Yeah. So how big was that first one that you got?
It was a 3-bedroom, 3-bath, 3 floors. Just outside the city of Gatlinburg. Didn't have a view, none of that stuff, but the location was really good. You could be in downtown in 2 to 3 minutes, depending whether or not you made the light. And you could take the back way to get to the spur to head to Pigeon Forge. And they were just finishing up the Rocky Top Sports Complex. And they had really big plans for that in terms of bringing in tournaments and things. So, and that side of town, even today, the east side, doesn't have a lot of rentals comparatively. Mm-hmm. If you bring up that map on Vrbo or Airbnb, they're all concentrated west and north, and then far east, like out in the Cosby area.
So how did you finance that first one?
Well, we paid cash for that one. I did an early withdrawal from my 401k, structured creatively to avoid too many taxes. I wanted to get in the market quick. Gatlinburg in that area, it's still a little insular today to some extent, but it was much more so then. That is, if you wanted to do business with the local bank, you had to be a local, or a soon-to-be local. They didn't want to rent money to out-of-town folks. They wanted to keep the money in the local economy. So I wanted to be part of that local economy before I started hitting the banks up, and it worked. Our next deal is something I still look back on sometimes and shake my head. It was that's the 8-bedroom that we still have. And I actually walked out of closing with a check.
My goodness. How did that? So let's hear about that, because that sounds like a unicorn. That sounds like a tall tale, big fish story that you would walk out of closing as a buyer with a check. Let's hear about that one.
Yeah, this is definitely one of those things you read about in some guru's get rich in real estate book about, no money down financing or something. Met a gentleman, I've done a lot of business with him, who is a retired banker. He just has contacts all over the place. And so I talked to him about it, and he connected me with a bank that was willing to make me a loan at a reasonable rate. They were willing to do some cross-collateralization with the cabin that I had just purchased. And then the seller only did business on Verbo. She managed it herself. And she was actually doing a really good job. I bought it in October, and she had about 4 months of rentals at about, I think it was around $28,000. And back then, as it is now, it was pretty easy to transfer a Verbo account. So she wrote me a check at closing for the money she already had in hand. I took over the account, walked out of there with like I said, a nice check for about $15,000. No money. I didn't put any money into it except for maybe $1,500 in closing.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Well, I want to talk about really quick the transferring of the Verbo and the money she already had in hand. So the money she already had in hand, I would imagine, was like a deposit that the guests made, or like the first payment, and they owed more after that. This was back when things were a little bit different, but there's a story I want to get to. So I want you to tell me about how that happened. So that was like a smooth process. She just gave you what she already had, right?
Yeah, she did. And literally just turned the account over to me with the logins. And it, in less than an hour of making adjustments to the account, it was all my name, my bank accounts. I got the review history, and I sent emails to all of the guests, telling them what happened. And she also sent her own emails, so they would know it was legit, that they were, getting it from both parties. But it was much simpler back then. And that was also when Verbo used to pay you right away when they got the money.
Right. Yeah. And I had a client, this was in probably 2018. And we were getting her a FSBO, or for sale by owner, for those of y'all not familiar with the term. And the seller was really insistent that she take on the future bookings. And she was like, I just don't want to do that. Like, why is it making me do this? And I can't remember exactly. He was going to hold back a certain amount of money from each booking. And we were like, no, we don't want to get tied up with you like this. Turns out he was trying to force the future owner to take on the future bookings because he'd already spent that deposit money and he didn't have it to transfer. So he'd already spent it all and was just being really, really difficult. And she was willing to go way over asking, which at the time was unheard of because it wasn't the same market that it is now. She was willing to go way over asking to just get it free and clear, but he couldn't do that because he'd already spent these people's money. He couldn't either transfer that money to the new owner. He couldn't refund it to the guest because he didn't have it. So that was a horror story about that one. We ended up moving on to something else.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's possible that I may have ended up running into some of those if I can, continued to just focus on that path. In this case, the seller was already under a supervision of a bank. They had made some questionable investments elsewhere. And so the bank kind of came in and said, okay, we're going to oversee everything so that we can get our money. It wasn't a short sale or anything like that, but it was being watched closely by their institution. So
Interesting. And I think local banks are still kind of like that. At least we found, with the commercial stuff we do and the long-term stuff we do, that, they basically want you to put a lot of your money into the bank so that they have that to, create a relationship with. And they also don't really want to deal with people who are doing like a one-off. They want to build a relationship. They want to be able to basically loan your money back to you. And, I think that's still the case today from what I found. So if you're going to try and go the local bank route instead of, like a mortgage broker or a national bank or something like that, you really do have to be willing to do the things, take the steps that they want you to create that relationship, because they want to see, when you're getting a DSCR loan or a conventional, you show them what they need to see, and that's pretty much the end of it. And it's not very much. But when you're going with a commercial bank, you have to send in a whole personal financial statement that shows all of your businesses and the different streams of income that you have and all of your assets. And then they decide, a lot of times with a committee, they say, okay, check out Chuck Kramer's personal financial statement. Are we going to loan this guy money? Yes or no? So it's definitely a really different process, and you have to make sure that you have the time. You need to get that before you find the deal. I know a lot of podcasts and advice is find the deal first and the money will come later. But this is something that, could take a week or two to get approved in some cases. So you want to make sure you have it ready to go before you actually find that deal.
Yep. And, you may even get turned down a couple of times.
Right.
That was back in the day when I took it personally. And
so you did, what was the most amount of cabins that you ever had at a time?
9.
9 cabins. That's a lot.
Yep.
So how were you managing these?
Well, early on, I started looking for a package. And again, back in 2016, the pickings were slim. Guesty was just barely around. You had your Host Away and another product I can't recall, mostly out of Europe. And then of course you had the old Expedia product, which Escapee I think it's called. I just didn't find them very useful for me. And then I stumbled across this Owner Res, and I realized it. As an IT guy, it could do everything I needed to do, and I could see the potential in it. And I was able, within a couple of months, to get everything up and running and fairly automated. So it didn't matter whether I had 1 or 9, I was spending the same amount of time in terms of reservation management and stuff. Now, when you get down to the, day-to-day handyman, cleaners, furnishings, that sort of thing, I just had a good local team, and my local family helped out a lot. In fact, a whole lot.
So were you always self-managing, or did you start out with a property manager?
The first place I had, not the first two, I put with Evolve, which isn't exactly a property manager. And part of that was because I really was too busy for a few months. I had already had this other deal on the table. I was going back and forth, and I had some other things going on in life at the time. And I thought, okay, let me start it with them. I can easily move it over. And they did okay the first few months, but I think that's because they were new back then. They threw a lot of attention at new listings. They were a different company also back then. But it dropped quickly after about 5 or 6 months. The bookings dropped off, and I said, I need to take this over. And as I've repeated to many other owners, we doubled our bookings, taking it back over, and did very, very well from there on. Plus, our ratings went up. With Evolve, we weren't getting 5 stars. And one of my theories around that was people didn't have the personal connection to the owner. They're dealing with a big national company, and in some cases, they think that company owns the property.
I can see that. Why you would think that.
Yeah. So we were very happy when we took it back over, and we did that to coincide with closing on the second place, and never looked back.
So what made you decide to go with Owner Res instead of some of the other platforms?
Well, Hostfully and shoot, and I don't remember the other European one. To start off with, the English wasn't that great. And I didn't want to have to spend time not only writing my own emails and messages to people, but rewriting theirs, and paying top dollar to boot. Escapia was too large and cumbersome and not flexible enough for what I wanted. Although at the time it was actually free, as long as you had a Verbo account. So, but when I looked at OwnerRez, I just saw the possibilities, and it came preset with all the messages you need to start off with, all the basic stuff. So I could get started within a couple of days and then spend time tuning it to my voice, to the way I want to do business. It even came with a rock solid legal agreement, renter agreement. So I didn't have to worry about that either. I like the way they handled the money. I could do my own processing. It's not perfect, a few shortcomings here and there. I know I've looked at their roadmap recently, and some of those will hopefully be going away soon. But what I get out of it, I feel, is a lot more than I put into it.
That's awesome. I didn't realize they came with a preset rental agreement. That's a big question that I see in like a lot of Facebook forums is, I need a rental agreement. Somebody help me. And nobody wants to answer that's not an attorney. So right. We use Guesty, or I think we might've just switched to Hospitable. I don't know. We switch around depending on what's pissing Luke off at the time. But we've never gone to OwnerRez just because it just feels like a lot to learn how to do. But I didn't realize it came with a rental agreement. So that's good information. That's a good nugget.
Yep. Well, yeah, I was going to offer a piece of advice, but I realized I probably shouldn't. So,
all right, skip that. So let's talk about, scaling from 1 to 9. What was your plan there? How are you financing those things? And then let's talk about scaling to other markets, because I know you've done that too.
Well, again, 30 years in IT during the heyday of technology. My retirement account was sufficient to help with a lot of this. And so I had no trouble, pulling out the down payments. My colleague, ex-banking industry executive, had contacts all over and started connecting me with more local banks. And that was easy to do. In fact, all my financing there has been with local banks. I didn't start using more. The commercial side of some of the local banks, Tennessee State Bank, Tennessee First, which is now First Horizon, Mountain Commerce Bank, People's Bank, Citizens Bank, Citizens Bank of Georgia. And so all small, with the exception of TSB and First Horizon, probably less than 6 or 7 branches. But you're right. They do want you to put some money in. Having operated IT for a couple of banks, including the world's largest credit union, I picked up some things about the banking industry, and that, they want your money, not only to loan it back to you, but they're allowed to loan that out, a multiple of that. And it depends on what they're approved for. So every dollar you give them could end up going out as $5 or $10, depending on the ratio that they're permitted. So they're very anxious to increase their deposits.
Yeah. The banking industry is really fascinating to me. And it wasn't like, it sounded absolutely hideous until like last year. And we were having lunch with the president of one of our banks that we use, a little local one. And the way that it works is fascinating. It's not what I would think anyway. And I'm not going to even try to explain anything because I can't, but it was really interesting just to listen to him talk about like what you just said. And the reason that they liked us for a lot of our long-term stuff is that they have to finance a certain amount in certain income level areas. And we checked all their boxes for that. And most people that are using this bank down here are buying in these big luxury areas. So they have to have a certain amount of these other places. So they were willing to give us like better rates and better terms on things because we were one of the only people that were buying in those types of areas. So the whole thing's really, really interesting. And I need to have a banker on. I need to have somebody who owns a bank go, we need you. agents@theshorttermshop.com or info@theshorttermshop.com. Email us because I want to have you on. I don't know anybody I should have on. But anyway, the banking industry, especially like the small local banking industry, is really fascinating.
It is. I may have a contact for you there. We'll talk after the show.
Cool. Sounds good. That would be awesome. So let's talk about, so you used commercial type financing from local banks to scale. You own in another market, right? Other than the
Yes.
Smoky?
Yeah, we own here in the Destin area. We've got 4 properties here.
All right. And what made you choose Destin or the Florida Panhandle over other types of markets?
Well, to be honest, I was already in Orlando, and I wasn't terribly impressed with the Orlando market overall. Not from my perspective, and not the returns that I wanted. I've heard Luke say he won't look at anything for less than 20% return, and I agree with that. And actually, my number is a little higher because I know if you look hard, you can find it. Mm-hmm. So I checked different markets, did my research on it. This is before things kind of went nuts here, price wise. So my timing was good. At least I think it was. Based on my current value of property, I would say my timing was good.
Yeah,
and
I would say so.
So we came up. We met with this great local real estate person and their family, and visited some properties. And the funny thing is, I didn't buy any of those properties. Didn't even put an offer in on those. But the next trip, I ended up finding 3 and put offers in on 2 of them, and ended up buying both. So
that's a really good point, that a lot of times, especially if you're buying in vacation markets, you may not, especially if it's in the summertime when everything's rented and we're not allowed to go in. It's good to just go and like familiarize yourself with the market, even if you can't get into everything you want to see. And then if there's nothing that you happen to want to offer on that trip, at least you're familiar, so that you know, like, oh, I don't really love that neighborhood. I think I like this area better. So I'm going to wait for something to come up here. It definitely helps. And a lot of people, they get discouraged if they come to town, to any of our towns, and look at stuff and don't find anything. Well, it's not a wasted trip. It's a learning experience of, being able to understand what the local market is like. And then you kind of know when something really great pops up, you have that confidence to be able to offer without having to come into town. So, yeah, I drive by that house on Buddy Street all the time, and I'm like, man, that would have been a good one. But
yeah, I think about that one house too.
It was kind of wacky. It definitely needed some reconfiguration, but it's like, not even a block to the beach. And man, that was a good one. Somebody got it.
Yeah. And there were a few others that, I think back on, and living here now, I pass by them on occasion. And there was a house that Rush showed me at one point, and I really liked it, but I kept telling him, no, I think it's too far from the beach, for what they're asking. And I kept thinking about that. Well, now I drive by there and I go, what was I thinking? I should have grabbed that.
Yeah, we all have those deals.
Yeah. And you showed me one on a street that, I was actually, you showed me 2 in the same neighborhood, and I was questionable on it. And it wasn't that I didn't like them. It's just something else came up better on that second trip, which was only 2 weeks later. Mm-hmm. But now I own on that street. So
yeah. And if you miss a deal, there's always another one coming down the road.
That's right.
And it's difficult it's easy to lose sight of that sometimes, that like, oh crap, you're like shoulda, coulda, woulda on one, and then one's always coming down the line. So, yep. Well, let's talk about your beach property. So can you compare and contrast owning a more year-round mountain market versus like a seasonal beach market?
Well, the first thing is that you've got to be good at your cash management. I make a practice to put aside 8 months of mortgage money and expense money, for each property. And then we draw from it. And every time we draw from it, put it back if we have it. And I say if we have it. For instance, one of our properties had 0 bookings in January and February of this year. But that's what the reserve is for. So that helps us a lot. And I don't sweat the off months. But unlike the Smokies, which is a year-round market, you really have to change your marketing. During the summer, you could rent a cardboard box on the street corner as long as you can walk to the beach from it here. But when you start hitting late October, November, December, January, February, and I would even say the first 2 weeks of March, you're fighting. You're no longer in the driver's seat. Renters are in the driver's seat, and you have to approach them differently. They're not always interested how close they are to the beach. They want to know how close they are to other things. So you got to adjust your listings. You have to change your tactics. You got to make that decision about, do I go snowbird or do I hold off and hope to get enough rentals to cover it. We this past year we decided that winter we're going to try it ourselves. No snowbirds. And despite having one property that had no bookings at all, the other properties did well enough to more than cover everything, better than we would have done with snowbirds. And again,
did you have snowbirds previously?
Nope.
No, you never had a snow. Okay, gotcha. I'm following now.
Yeah,
we've never done snowbirds either, and we've thought about it. Like when we opened up in Cape Sandblast, we were like, maybe we should do a snowbird because this is kind of new. We're not sure, and we haven't needed to.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. As long as you shift your marketing, it's a reminder that this is not a set it and forget it business. Even if you're in a year-round market, you still need to tweak. And you got to get an understanding of the flow of bookings. For instance, in the Smokies, when are people looking for the fall leaf peeper dates? When are they looking for Christmas dates? And maybe make minor adjustments to your title or the first couple of lines of your listing to attract those people. Maybe swap in a photo of, a leaf change, a Christmas tree in the living room, or if you do that sort of thing, just something to get their attention. And the beach isn't any different, but people are less focused on the holidays here. It's you just got to figure out what it is that's interesting them.
Totally agree with that. All right. Well, so we're coming to the end of the show. Lots of great information so far. And we have 3 questions that we ask everyone at the end of the show. And the first one is, what advice would you give 20-year-old Chuck?
There was a movie called Frequency where a guy was able to talk to himself in the past through shortwave radio.
I remember that movie.
This reminds me of that. My first instinct would be buy Yahoo and Google. But the truth is, at 20, I had already owned my first house. And that was a big leap. And that's something that I would go back and say, don't stop at 1. You can do this, and point out the long-term aspects of it. And you're going to hit obstacles. I mean, you will with anything. Nothing's that simple. But if you look at the real estate market as a whole over the years, it has always ratcheted up. Yeah, I mean, it's called a ratchet because it goes up and down. But
right.
But it will go up. And don't focus as much on the purchase price as you focus on your out of the pocket, because your return is based on your out of pocket expense, not the purchase price. And that was something that was hard for me to grasp it for some reason at 20 and 21.
Well, if that's the only thing that's hard for you to grasp at 20 and 21, you're doing better than most of us were. All right. So second question, along the same lines, but slightly different. What advice would you give a new investor who's getting started today?
First thing would be, don't overextend. And,
very good advice.
It's not just investing. Look at your cash management. Make sure you have reserves. Things can happen that you might never anticipate. COVID, for example.
Right.
Or an oil rig offshore, shutting down the beaches for, 8 months. Insurance helps with some of that, but you need to be your own insurance. So when you stop and think that you've got I'm just going to pull numbers out of the air. You've got $300,000 to spend, actual cash to put into something. As you're doing your math, figure out what your monthly operational expenses are and put aside at least 4 to 6 of that, or know where it's going to come from. I wouldn't advocate necessarily relying on credit cards, but that is an option. But you have to have it. You got to be able to get the money from somewhere. And you know the old rule, Murphy's Law. If you don't have it, you need it. If you have it, you don't need it. So.
Right. Also great advice. And then last question, what is your favorite book that's impacted your mindset?
Going way back, Carlton Sheets, No Money Down.
Oh, nobody said that one yet.
Well, it's an old book. So, some of your guests weren't even born. He was the real estate guru of the late 80s and 90s.
Gotcha.
And my boss had recommended this book to me, and I read it. And what it got me to focus on not only was the fact that your return is based on the money you put into it, not the cost of the house, because the way you're brought up, it was different. But it also got me focused on optimizing taxes. Because another big piece of that book was this is tax deductible. So when you're spending X dollars, putting it out, you're really only spending a percentage of that because you're going to save it on the tax end of things. And from that day forward, I think about almost every purchase that way. So not just real estate, everything. So I feel like I'm always getting a discount.
All really great advice. Well, Chuck, thank you so much for coming on. Y'all, Chuck is not for hire. So unless he says differently, we're not going to give out his contact information. He's here solely for education on the platform, and he is not available for private mentorship. That's the word I was looking for.
Right.
Gotcha.
And
so,
of course, I'm in the Facebook groups. I'll do my best to answer questions I see there, although lately my time online has been a little sparse, but that'll change soon. People see more of me.
Yep. Chuck's out there being world's greatest granddad.
That depends who you ask. I think of the 3, I think you get at least 2 that would say that.
Awesome. Well, Chuck, thanks so much for coming on. We'll catch you later. Catch you on the Facebook groups.
Sure. Thanks, Avery.